Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, and I'm going to continue with something I started on Tuesday after my cooking lesson. I started talking about change in culture and the concept of conserving or conservation or being conservative, and that is the point I want to continue today. So let's get started. All right, so let's get started. I'm not going to break out the bells and whistles too much this time. I think that was just a bit of fun, but I might at some point, you never know. But for now, I want to talk about the concept of conserving, and I want to look at it in a bunch of different ways. And first, I want to talk about the verb to conserve, which is very close to the verb to preserve. And modern dictionaries just differentiate between the two of them in terms of what it is that they are trying to conserve or preserve. That is, in modern parlance, to conserve tends to be associated with the natural world, and preserve tends to be associated with the constructed world. Not entirely, but generally speaking. So that you could conserve the plants and animals in a conservation area, but you would preserve a 18th century building. That's the general distinction, but of course there are things like strawberry preserves which are not they're not kept in their original condition. They are cooked and made into a jelly or jam or some such thing that will keep them for a long time. They will conserve them for a long time, but they're not the same. But it's the sameness that is what I want to think about. That people who tend to want to be conservative when it comes to their culture means that they don't want it to change. Just as they don't want the natural world to change at least in a negative sense. Like if you want to conserve the cloud leopard in northern Borneo, what it means is you don't want its population to get any lower. You don't want it to change in a negative direction. If the cloud leopard population grows and grows and grows, then you might be okay. I mean, it's a change that is positive, although there may come a point where you have too many of them. Just like there are way too many deer in New York State right now. And so they have hunting season periodically, and you get to kill a certain number of them to keep the population down because they've conserved them too well. Well, what about cultures? Well, now that's a very curious phenomenon. People want to keep their culture the way it is often, but they don't realize that it's going to change whether they like it or not. And they can try to stop the change, but it's not going to happen. So, like both in the United Kingdom and the United States right now, they're all up in arms about change brought about by immigrants. The what's called Brexit, that is the exit of Britain from the European Union, was in large part fueled by people who were opposed to the changes that had been brought about by joining the European Union. And one of them was the free passage of citizens. So the French and Spanish and Germans and Italians could go and work in Britain without hindrance. But of course, the British could go and work in Spain or Italy or Germany. That was the trade-off. But a certain number of people were saying, "Oh, we don't want those immigrants coming here. They're changing our culture." Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but your culture is changing whether you want it to or not, and immigrants are coming whether you want them to or not, and they've been doing it for a very long time. You think, okay, well, the really English are Anglo-Saxons, right? They are the bulwark of the nation. Well, they were immigrants at one point. Back when Britain was a Roman colony, the supposedly indigenous people were what we now call Celts or Gaelic people. And when the Romans had to leave in the 5th century because the capital, Rome, was under attack and they needed all the defense they could get, they left the Celts open to invasion by the Angles and the Saxons, and they came and took it over. And then Vikings also came and they took part of it. And then eventually the Normans came up from Normandy in northern France, and they brought their own culture. So that, you know, as you look at the English language right now, it's a very complicated mixture of German from the Angles and Saxons, and Danish from the Vikings, and French from the Normans. You know, it's a hybrid, because people just keep coming, and they keep coming. So trying to stem the tide right now, because somehow or other you've got something against like Indians or Pakistanis or Kenyans or Caribbean peoples, all people from all over the globe who you conquered and colonized back in the 19th century and made them citizens because you'd colonized them. Well, now they're turning the tables, and they're saying, okay, well, you made us citizens, now we're coming over there. Just like you came and brought your culture to us. You know, what is the national language of India? It's English, because they can't decide on all the multiplicity of languages that are spoken throughout the subcontinent, but English is a sort of lingua franca. Okay, so you brought that to India along with cricket and all kinds of other English things, and you know, unfortunately now the Indians and Pakistanis are better than the English at cricket, but things evolve and change, and so I guess my critical point is that you have to accept that change is going to happen. You can't say I'm going to stop the clock now, we're not going to change anymore, because you will. What you have to do is embrace change, but do it in an intelligent way. And you say, well, I'm not sure that this change is a good one, so I'm going to be careful about that. But this one I think is a really good one, so I'm going to accept that. And several examples in my own life. About 1982, I think it was, PCs, mostly desktops, got kind of cheap. after some knockoffs were made of the IBM PC. So the IBM PC was $5,000 at the outset, which is way more than I could possibly afford. Around that time, I was making about $16,000 a year before tax, so I wasn't going to be able to buy one of those. But there were various knockoffs, and Tandy Radio Shack had well, it was a Tandy 1000, was $1,000. I could afford that on loan, but I had to decide, like, do I want to spend $1,000 on a laptop when mostly I'm going to use it for word processing? So in the summer of 1982, I spent the whole summer writing academic papers, as I used to, by writing them on a yellow pad and then typing them up, and as I was typing them, like, be editing them, and then we had a computer lab at the university where I could go, where we had a few IBMs with a word processor, WordStar, on them, and I could use that. And so I did a kind of, comparison shopping. Like, is it better with the yellow pad or with the word processor? And I was torn. The word processors weren't very good, and you couldn't really see much of what you were writing on a screen, as opposed to the yellow pad, I guess. So I was a little bit conservative for a while. But in the end, I bought a Tandy 1000 and didn't look back. It became my standard word processor. I threw away my yellow pad. I started writing my papers directly on the machine. And when I'm done, just hit print and we're all done. So it saved me time. It wasn't necessarily a better way of doing things, it was just a quicker way of doing them. And I suppose a little bit more efficient. And as computers evolved and as word processors evolved, it's got so much better. And I wouldn't say that my word processor now is like a lot better than the ones in the old days, but it's better, and I'm happy to embrace that change, with reservations. I'm also happy to be on the internet now, because now I can look up all kinds of academic journals through my university, because they have subscriptions to like thousands of journals, including ones in anthropology that I need, and I don't have to go to a library. It's all very useful. When it comes to phones, I'm very conservative. I have a smartphone. I've had some form of phone for quite a long time, but I don't use it, except for the necessary like validation of my identification when I'm logging on to something. I may have to use what's called Duo Mobile, and so I log on to my university account, and it says, okay, we're going to send a text to your telephone, to your phone, and I have to press approve and so on. So I need it for that. I don't use it for phone calls. I would estimate that I probably use it for phone calls about 3 or 4 times a year, usually, because in fact I used it today for that, because totally unexpected, I had ordered a book from Amazon, and it was supposed to come next week, but the guy showed up with it today, and he phoned me up and said, I'm in the parking lot, come and get it. And so I went down and got it. Very useful. That's the kind of phone calls I use my phone for. I don't carry it with me when I go out. It stays home. unless somebody particularly needs validation. Like again, if I go to the post office here, I often need to show them my messages on my phone from them to validate who I am. But other than that, it just sits on my desk, and once a day I plug it in to renew the battery. I mean, I really should buy a new one because this one is really old and broken and not really functional. But I don't use it. I don't. It's a change that is not relevant to my life. So that's my bottom line, is that like cultures are gonna change all the time. You can't do anything about it. What you can do is like embrace the change and decide how you're going to interact with it, and what parts of the change are going to be useful to you and what parts of it are you going to ignore or maybe even fight against. But good luck with that. Okay, well, there's my little ramble on conservatism and change for a Friday. Please, if you like my videos, tell your friends. Please like, please subscribe, and I will be back on Tuesday, maybe with a recipe, maybe with more talking heads, I don't know. But have a good weekend.